We are the nerds of the apocalypse.
Okay, so hey everybody. In case you don't know, this is Chad Bowers. We're here for the, he's done Secret Wars, X-Men 92. You've had 4 paper issues, and they've all released digitally now, right? Are we done? Is that, I gotta be honest with you, I just read the last issue, like sitting, I was like, I gotta moderate this panel, I gotta read what's happening. And I rarely laugh out loud when I read comics. I laughed out loud at something you guys wrote in that. I don't know, can we talk, has everybody read X-Men 92? Everybody's read it? The latest ones? Do you guys mind if we talk about it a little bit? It's not really spoilery, but when... I'm going to spoil some stuff. Okay, we're talking about, okay, so, because you know, Wolverine gets kind of mind controlled, and to snap out of it, someone's like, can you please get Cyclops? And then he's like, what? And then he uses, because you don't want to use his claws, and he's like, ah, and he rips that. I laughed out loud, it was so funny. But X-Men 92, man, it's blown up, man.
Yeah, it's a big deal, I guess. X-Men 92, if you haven't read the series, basically is tied into Marvel's Secret Wars event that's going on right now. So basically what's happened is the Marvel multiverse has sort of collapsed down into this one planet called Battle World. You guys are familiar with sort of how that works, right? So, and Battle World is divided up into these different sections. And each section is sort of inspired by a different era of Marvel. So you've got like one era that's sort of based off of like, or one continent that's sort of based off of Civil War. You got another continent that's sort of based off of like Planet Hulk, even though they're all kind of like reimaginings of those things. Well, our continent is Westchester, and it's literally about the size of South Carolina. It's the smallest one on the map, and it's sort of inspired by. A lot of people immediately assume that it's inspired by the animated series because of that cover to #1. If you guys haven't seen the cover to #1, come up the table, you'll see it. It's a beautiful cover by Pepe Larraz. But a lot of people assume it's the animated series, and while the animated series is certainly a big part of it, the animated series is not. This is not like season 6 of the animated series. This is its own thing. This is a world where the X-Men, the world of X-Men 92, is a world where the X-Men became as popular in their world as they became in our world in 1992. So that's the thing. So in the world of X-Men 92, the X-Men are celebrity superheroes. They're like the biggest thing going. So they've got like, you know, when you would walk into Food Lion in 1992, you would see like a Chef Boyardee can of the X-Men with the X-Men on it. Well, that happened in 92, right? Like the X-Men cards that Jim Lee did in 1992, well, they're part of the X-Men 92 world. The animated series is an animated series about this team in the world of X-Men 92. So there's an X-Men museum where you've got like all of the X-Men action figures and toys and stuff like that. So that's kind of what X-Men 92 is about. Which really opens the doors, like you said, Stevie, for like a lot of really cool jokes, right? And stuff that you can do. So it's just really, hopefully, it's just chock full of like references to that era and comics at that time and different little pieces and stuff. So we really had a lot of fun writing it. Yeah.
So when you get your ideas for X-Men 92, like you grew up in the era, right? Like
I did. I was 13.
Yeah, I was drawn to where, and I think this is where it gets its popularity from, and I think it's the same thing that's happening a lot now in nerd culture, is that I was a child, and now I couldn't buy things because my parents wouldn't let me, but now I'm a grown man, I get whatever I want. And then there's a show I used to watch, a comic book form. You know, it's not a big show, but like that is what I sat down and watched every Saturday. Sure. You know, and so that draws me to it, and I think that where a lot of the popularity stems from this is because people enjoy it. And then, you know, the X-Men, kind of like that was 90s comics. It was like there was 100 X-Men comics, everybody loved it, the costumes, everything like that. And I felt like your book pretty much took everything, like X Factor, and just you wrote a story, you guys created a story that encompassed all of it, and it made sense, and I loved it.
Well, thanks. You're welcome.
Yeah. Was it tough coming up with something like that? Was that your goal, to try to put everything in?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly right out of the gate, once we kind of figured out what it was going to be, to make sure that we tried to hit all the big parts of that era, and sort of what stories felt like in that era without necessarily being like a retread.
Right.
And you know, you want to feel new and different. You want to feel like it's something you haven't read before.
Right.
So it would have been really easy to like fall into the trap of doing just like, oh, another Magneto story or another Mr. Sinister story or something like like that. So that was the real thing, is to try to figure out what our book was going to feel like and how it was going to both feel like a comic from that time, but also something new and different.
Right.
And once we figured out the premise and how the dynamics of the world work, we kind of like, that was pretty easy after that.
I enjoyed the personalities because I feel like, comics evolve and personalities change. But, you've gone back to how things used to be, with those characters. Like, you got the love with Rogue and Gambit, that's not really there anymore.
Right.
And you got the beef between Wolverine and Cyclops. That's not like, I'm gonna kill you beef, like, it's just like lighthearted and stuff like that. Like we talked about earlier.
It's Saturday morning cartoon style, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
Things are so dark now, and it's nice, fun. I used to get mad at me because I say fun all the time. It's like, it's fun, everything is fun. But you read it and you enjoy it, and you're not sad at some stuff. You're just like excited to read what's happening next.
Well, it's funny, like, fun gets a bad rap in comics.
It does.
Fun is like one of the worst things you can kind of describe a comic as is fun, which is weird, right? But I think in the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've seen the return of a lot of fun comics. So if you read, I would say it kind of starts. I mean, there's a lot of things that I guess it starts with. And certainly, like, Ms. Marvel and things like Squirrel Girl are really doing well. Chris and I actually worked with Erica Henderson on a book for Monkey Brain called Erica Henderson, who's the artist for the Beatles Squirrel Girl. So she's a great friend. So that is a great book. I'm sure Batgirl over at DC. So fun comics aren't necessarily as bad as maybe they once were or looked down on. So when we got this, it would have been real easy to sort of really lean into that dark and edgy, you killed my brother kind of stuff from like that time period. But like it's much, I don't know, it just feels right to kind of do the, that series as something that's like an entry point for a lot of people, because like you said, that cartoon was an entry point for a lot of people, that comic series was an entry point for a lot of people, so you want that to feel like something that's kind of like a little more all-in.
Now, it was definitely new for me because I didn't know who Cassandra Nova was.
Okay.
Like, I've never heard of her before, so reading that was new and fresh for me.
Who's read the book? Okay, so I'm going to spoil everything. That's fine. If you haven't picked up the first 4 already, then this will make you want to go and get it. Also, I want to say that I write the book with Chris Sims. If you're not familiar with Chris, Chris writes for Comics Alliance. Chris has a relatively popular, Chris has a very popular podcast called War Rocket Ajax. Chris and I met at Heroes and Dragons when we were in college. We worked at the comic store together for about 7 years and started writing comics together around 2007 and have kind of been working on stuff ever since. So Chris lives in Sumter, which as far as I know, Sumter's underwater right now. So he could not make it today. But I want to call him in just a second and like just have him kind of like say some stuff because I told him we'd be here. So, where was I going? I just don't want to like pretend like I'm the only person that has anything.
You're right. Yes.
Although I will say I'm responsible for that Wolverine. It's gonna be like so much. Let's see. But yeah, so writing with Chris is a big deal as far as that goes because he and I are both. We're not exactly the same age. But we're close enough to where we both kind of experience the X-Men and that kind of thing at the same time.
Now you started working. You did this through Marvel on the X-Men comics. So you're talking about having fun come back in the comic world. Is that, do you think, it's a large part of because Marvel has loosened up on what it's allowing to be in comics, or how, I guess better question, how much oversight do they have when you guys are writing?
Honestly, it's really crazy because Secret Wars is like, it's kind of a free for all. You can do whatever you want to do. Okay. And there were very few things that they told us that we couldn't do. Like we had, the promise ring bit in number 3, number 2, I'm sorry, where Gambit gives Rogue a promise ring.
Right.
Like we were sure they were going to cut that one. And every time we started turning in like plots and like spreading out the plots, they kept coming back and like, hey, make sure that promise ring bit's still in there. So like the things that you think that they're not going to like end up being kind of the things that they're like super into. So Marvel's really cool to work for. Marvel has had essentially like a lot of input as far as what they want to see for the book. Hey, we like it when you guys do this kind of thing, but not necessarily you guys can and cannot do stuff. There's really nothing they've told us at this point that we couldn't do, which is great. And I don't know if you guys know, but X-Men 92 was a miniseries. It was originally created for the Marvel Infinite Comics app. So if you, you can read it on your phone, or you can read it on a computer, or you can read it on a tablet. And then that was 8 issues online that they did bi-weekly. That started in, I guess, June. And then they've been coming out monthly ever since, and every monthly issue is a combination of 2 digital issues. It's kind of confusing, but it's pretty cool. That said, we've actually been picked up for an ongoing series of Marvel, so that's going to start in February. And that's going to be print first, so that'll be a print comic first, and then it'll be available on the Marvel apps after that, but it won't be a digital first comic. So just so you know that. But we haven't picked up for an ongoing series, and without revealing too much, they've already kind of talked about this, but our book's not going to be set on Battle World anymore. Our book's going to be set kind of in its own thing. And for 2 guys who've only done one thing for Marvel, there's a lot of freedom being given to us as far as what we can do. Like, there's really, we can do anything we want to in these books. We throw stuff out at them. Marvel's like, yeah, we can do that. You can do that. You can do that. We're like, well, can we? I mean, I can't even tell you what we're gonna do. But there's some crazy stuff. Like, there's something that's gonna happen in the second story arc that we're gonna do that is absolutely insane, and I can't believe that they're letting us do it. But anyway, so please read the ongoing series. We want it to be a huge success, and it's gonna be well worth your time.
So that's all you can tell us about the ongoing series?
Now, I can tell you that the ongoing series, it incorporates the school aspect a little bit. So imagine if the X-Men timeline was kind of working in reverse. One of the things you mentioned was Cassandra Nova. How many of you are familiar with the X-Men villain Cassandra Nova? In the early, in 2000, around the time that the first movie came out, Grant Morrison came on to the X-Men and sort of revitalized the property with new X-Men. That's where the X-Men sort of started. They kind of started looking like they were wearing their movie costumes. They were wearing black leather and those kind of things. It's a fantastic run. It's my favorite X-Men run of all time, and I love Chris Claremont too. But Grant's run is my favorite run. Well, the villain of Grant's run is a character named Cassandra Nova, and Cassandra Nova later on goes on to be this super crazy concept of this thing called a Maudry, which is it's like your shadow sister type thing. Anyway, it's a very Grant Morrison concept. And if you watch the animated series, you know that the animated series would take a concept that did not necessarily translate well to a television show, like the Dark Phoenix saga, which is a really dark story.
Oh, yeah.
And then they would kind of do the TV version of that.
Right.
So one of the first things we thought about was what if we were to take a story from not the 90s, so the first story of the 21st century, which is Grant's new X-Men story, and adapt it for the 90s. So we're kind of moving the timeline backwards a little bit. So we're pulling in stuff from the future into the 90s. Well, one of the things that the early 2000s, 1999, 2000 did, is they introduced the concept again of the X-Men as teachers, which had never been a part of the comics before. Obviously Professor Xavier was the teacher in the 60s, and then you had the White Queen, and you had Banshee as the Generation X teachers or headmasters. But Cyclops had never taught a class. Wolverine had never taught a class. Storm had never been a teacher. But when the movies came out, the best way they incorporated that, if you remember that first movie, is the X-Men were not just the X-Men superheroes; they were actually teachers at the school.
Right.
And so one of the things that we thought would be cool is you saw the '90s characters kind of get into that teacher role. So the basic premise of the new ongoing series is we sort of, again, move the timeline backwards a little bit, and we see the '92 X-Men becoming teachers to these Generation X kids and other mutants from that time period.
Okay, so you said it's not set on Battle World, so it's just it's almost like if we started the '90s comic again, right?
Sort of.
Are you incorporating any other Marvel characters into it, or is it simply just the '92 X-Men and that's it? Can we talk about that?
I don't know.
I mean, so it doesn't follow anything else. It's its own thing. 'Cause they try to interlock and connect everything. Oh, you texting and asking somebody?
No, I'm gonna call Chris.
Oh, all right.
I'll see what Chris said.
This is like a phone a friend situation. I'm gonna call my mom. What do you think of this, Mom?
I'm talking to Jen.
She's in Disney World. I'm jealous. caption now.
Not if it's raining.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe he is underway.
I hope he has a really awkward.
Hello?
Hey!
Hey.
Hey, you're on the microphone.
Oh, hi. I'm actually at Waffle House.
Well, that's perfect. That's exactly what I expected. So you could go to Waffle House, but not the show.
I live next door to Waffle House.
I
have to cross the river to get to Waffle House.
We have a room full of people.
I'm welcome. Thanks
Yeah.
for coming out, everybody.
Yeah. We just got
Thanks for
the
doing what I didn't do.
Yeah, I talked about all my stuff. We just got the question: are we allowed to use, or will we be using other characters that are not X-Men characters or other Marvel characters in the ongoing series? And I thought I'd let you answer that one.
Yes. Alright, cool. I'm gonna go back to sit for a while.
Sounds good. I just didn't know. I was trying to figure out like how much we should say, because obviously we're going to be able to. Yes, the world of the Marvel Universe is open to us to do kind of whatever we want to do. So naturally, there's characters that we want to write, and we're going to bring them in. And you know, guest stars are a big part of X-Men historically.
Yeah, I mean, like if you go back and look at those early '90s X-Men comics that we've been reading for you know a year solid at this point, you and me. There's Ghost Rider in New Orleans. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And one of the cool things about the ongoing series that's coming up is that when it was a Secret Wars miniseries and they were on Battle World, our options were really limited as far as what we could do and where we could go. Like, you couldn't have somebody who wasn't an X-Men character in that section of Battle World. You couldn't leave Westchester. So now that we have those options open for us, like, yeah, we're definitely going to take them. Like, we've got, I'd say, what is it, Jen? 3 storylines planned where we really pull in some guest stars.
Yeah, well, the first story arc is pretty X-Men heavy, but the second story arc, I'm not going to reveal too much, but the second story arc, like, we've got non-X-Men guest stars in it, and we've got real-world guest stars in it. I think that's okay to say, right?
Wolverine meets Hugh
Yeah, like there are people from our world being pulled into the world of X-Men too, which is pretty crazy. But anyway, so you'll see that, and then three's got some guest stars in it. So yeah, naturally it's going to have a lot of people and characters that, you know, if Marvel gave you one shot to write comics, and like we have no guarantee beyond this ongoing series that we'll ever do anything else again at Marvel. We hope to. But you know, we wanted to say like, okay, if we only got to write this, who would we want to write? You know, and so take your pick. There's tons of characters.
Yeah, there's one guy definitely at the top of that list, I think, for both of us. That makes perfect sense. You know, like there's characters that have kind of a history of teaming up the X-Men, especially in that era. So we're really looking forward to doing some really cool stuff, I think. And then the cool thing is like, we get to, because it's not in the mainstream Marvel universe, it's not like in that core, like we do actually kind of get to build a 1992 universe again.
Right.
Which, like, our first story arc has a new character in it, who's, you know, very much inspired by X-Men stories. And it's kind of based on some X-Men stuff that's happened in more recent years, just like the Secret Wars miniseries. But he has a new character, and we're kind of pulling in new stuff and building stuff. I was asked if we were going to bring in an Iron Man with a mullet.
Yeah, but he's going to be wearing the War Machine armor, I think, right?
He's going to be wearing his
football pants.
Armor. I'm pretty much that.
Yeah, that's right. All right, cool. Well, what'd you get at Waffle House?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Look, I'm going to be here for a little bit. Any other questions? Just call me back.
Okay.
I'm gonna go eat my waffle.
All right, sounds good.
Seriously, thank you everybody for coming out. I'm really sorry I couldn't be there. I drive across a flooded area there right now. So thank you all for coming out and stay safe, everybody. And Jen, I'll talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye.
I really want to know what kind of waffle we get.
No, it's a pecan. It's always a pecan. So yeah, that was, I wanted to be here. I'm missing. But yeah, you know, we're going to use a lot of fun characters that are going to like that are going to be sort of dreams to write too, right? You know, I want to just tell you guys everything. Like, I'm really mad. Like the first thing Marvel does is they get me to sign. They don't worry about Chris. They get me to sign an NDA or non-disclosure because they know I'll be like, and Deathhead's going to be there, and this guy's going to be there, and this guy. So yeah. Anyway, Deathhead is going to be there.
Well, I mean, you want to open it up to the audience?
Yeah, that's fine.
Raise your hand. Got a question.
We got plenty of time, so.
Oh, all right. You in the back. Jump your hand up first.
For your, you say you have a special guest character like the celebrities. Do you have to ask a permission, or you just pick them out in your own free will?
It didn't happen where we asked for them. But we suggested, based on kind of how the story arc works, we were like, wouldn't it be really cool? We were talking to our editor, we were like, wouldn't it be really cool if we could get like this kind of thing? And he was like, hold on for a second. And then he came back and he was like, okay, who do you want? And we were like, well, could we get these people, these people, these people, these people? And they were like, okay, give us like a week. And they came back and they were like, we got like 3 of those. So that's how it happened. It wasn't like we really pitched it. It was just one of these things. It was like, you guys remember that Shadow Man comic where Shadow Man teamed up with Aerosmith?
Did you do that? Did the X-Men team up with Aerosmith?
No. But that's also a 90s comic that a lot of people remember. So ours is kind of a joke on that, right? It was an idea of like, man, wouldn't it be weird if we could get like this kind of thing going?
One Direction. That would be cool. They all died.
Yeah. We're not pulling them into the 90s. But anyway, so that's kind of the idea. Is just trying to figure out. It's not Aerosmith, so I don't want to see like on Bleeding Cool on Monday that Aerosmith will be in X-Men 92 #1. Yeah, exactly. So it's not Aerosmith. I'm trying to get other people. It's not the cast of Saved by the Bell. Somebody suggested that too. It's like yeah. But anyway, it'll be a lot of fun. But to answer your question, there's not really. What I found is there's not really one way that these things happen at Marvel, so you don't go to them and say like, you know, we'd like to do this. We just kind of talk about stuff, and like the reach of Marvel as a company is just insane sometimes, and the stuff they put together is just really cool. So, yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, so I noticed that a lot of people in here haven't read the book yet, me, myself included, and I'm primarily an indie book reader just because their worlds tend to be a lot more understandable, and with this being X-Men, do you feel like there should be any reader background, like other works that should be read before reading your book? And if so, which ones? And if not, does it really envelop you into a different world? Because I know that you had mentioned it is a little bit aside from Secret Wars.
It's like, if you've read any X-Men, or if you kind of know the basic idea of the X-Men, I think our book's pretty easy to understand, because of the setup of Battle World, we don't really pull in a lot of hard sword, just real solid canon. You know what Rogue's deal is, right? She's a Southern Belle who can't touch people because she'll absorb their powers. You kind of know what Gambit's like. He's a Cajun scumbag who charges cards. You know what I mean? You know what Wolverine's like. He's gruff and he's got claws. So if you know the basic premise of those guys, just at the very, just the basic nature of those guys, it's fine. We don't make specific references to X-Men 187. If you kind of know that Wolverine and Cyclops kind of butt heads every once in a while, that's really all you need to know. If you've read the X-Men, or if you were around in that time period, like the 90s, and are real familiar with the boom, it was literally called the explosion in the 90s, right? If you're kind of familiar with that era, there's going to be little Easter eggs that are in the book that I think will really kind of make it sing a little better, but at the same time, it's still a good story regardless. It's just, some of the jokes might be kind of, I don't know, inside baseball, I guess. But please read it.
If you really want reference, Netflix has the X-Men 90s series. You watch the first story arc, the Night of the Sentinels, you'll be good to go. Really, that's all. Yeah,
that's a good point. The first episode of X-Men the Animated Series, and I do have to stress this is not X-Men the Animated Series. Yeah. This is not like a book that's set in the X-Men Animated Series world. It's its own thing. that's has that in there, but it's not like season 6.
Right.
The first episode of X-Men the Animated Series takes place in a mall. So if anybody remembers that episode, it's where they meet Jubilee and Jubilee's in the mall and the Sentinels attack and all that stuff. The first issue of our book takes place in a mall as well, as kind of an homage to that, because we knew that that was a lot of people's first memory of the X-Men, and so it's nice to sort of like set that tone. But they don't say, hey, remember that time we were in the mall and we got attacked by Sentinels when we met Jubilee? Like, they don't like reference that specifically, but if you kind of know what's going on, you'll be like, oh, I remember that, that was fun. So, and we do a lot of stuff like that.
That's right, so I remember that.
Yeah.
It is a very good opening issue, too.
They play laser tag in the first issue.
Cyclops wins.
They're actually optic force beams, they're not lasers.
Yeah.
That was it's a joke in number 4. Yeah. Did you get to that joke too? Yeah, sorry.
I don't know if you weren't in here. I got the
Sorry.
That's okay. I got the Force issue and I just read it like right before here. I was like, I had to read this. I picked it up yesterday. Just came the paper issue. I don't read them digitally. I read them paper.
Right.
That being said, is there after issue 4 of the paper? Is there more out after this?
No, that's it. Number 4 collects number 7 and 8 of the Infinite comic.
So what do you? There's 2 epilogues. Is that am I just?
Yeah.
Am I just supposed to go? Oh, I guess I wonder what's going to happen. Or
no, that's where the ongoing series comes in. The ongoing series picks up. So the series ends, and you get these 2 epilogues, and the epilogues set up some stuff that's going to be sort of front and center of the ongoing.
Okay. Does anybody else have more questions? Oh, you start first.
So, who approached whom with the idea? Did Marvel contact you guys, or did you come up with it and say, hey, this is going to be awesome?
Marvel had the idea that they wanted to do an X-Men, a 92 book for Secret Wars. They didn't know what that was, though. They just knew that, like, they wanted something sort of set in that. They wanted something with those characters in those Jim Lee costumes. They wanted those characters doing something. They just didn't quite have an idea what it was. And Chris and I, we did a book called Downset Fight for Oni. And we went to Emerald City Comic Con back in 2014 when the book was launched, and we kind of met a lot of Marvel editors there, and I gave a bunch of copies away to different editors. And I guess Tom Brevoort got a copy, and Tom Brevoort read a copy on his plane ride back, I think, and really liked it, thought it was funny, and made a couple of recommendations to people on Tumblr that they should pick it up and stuff. And so we knew then, we were like, oh, you know, they're paying attention. And then we had another book that we did, I mentioned it earlier, it was called Subatomic Party Girls. It was a book that we did with Erica Henderson from Monkey Brain. And then, like, Erica got pulled off of our 4th issue of Subatomic Party Girls to go do Squirrel Girl. And that's when we knew, okay, like, Marvel's, like, tracking us, right? I mean, not tracking us, but, you know, they at least know who we are, right? So, yeah, they had drones around.
My friends now!
And so once Erica got the job, we said, okay, maybe it's our turn to, like, approach somebody. And so I emailed Jordan White, who was our editor, because we had an idea for a Deadpool thing, and Jordan's the Deadpool editor. And we were wanting to pitch this Deadpool thing, and Jordan started talking to us a little bit about that, and really sort of liked the idea that we could do, but once we started digging into it, we're like, there's no way we can do this book, this Deadpool thing. But Jordan said, hey, are you guys going to be at San Diego Comic Con? And Chris was that year. He was going for Comics Alliance to cover the event for Comics Alliance. I said, I'm not, Chris is. And so Jordan set up a meeting with Chris. We did the same thing where we kind of conference called and talked. And that's where they offered us the book. They're like, we think you guys would be perfect for it. You got about a week, come up with what you would do. You got about a week to come up with what you would do, and we'll reconvene. And so Chris and I, you know, brainstormed for about a week, came up with a story, and went back and said, there you go, there's X-Men 92. And they were like, this is great, you can't do this because X-Men 92 is going to be set in Secret Wars. And we were like, okay, so we pulled back, pitched another idea, and that's essentially kind of what this one was. So, I mean, so in a roundabout way, our work that we'd done before got us noticed. We made the initiative, contacted Marvel. Marvel had something kind of in mind for us already. So, but the X-Men 92 idea was not something we pitched to them directly. They kind of came to us with it.
I will say that if you're interested in X-Men 92 and you haven't read any Secret Wars, it really stands alone. Like the biggest thing I noticed was that instead of saying God, they say Doom, and that's really it. It's a nice standalone story apart from everything else.
Dr. Doom is God on Battleworld.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So when anybody says, "Oh God," instead of that, they say, "Oh Doom."
Doom help us. Stuff like that.
And Doom has appointed barons of each little section of Battleworld, and so President Robert Kelly is the Baron of Westchester.
Sounds like a Robin Hood villain. He sounds like a Robin Hood villain.
Oh yeah, he's cool because like there's this whole like hierarchy of how these characters work, and they all look kind of like their clothes are kind of archaic, and they have these kind of like look to it. But Baron Kelly is still in his suit that he would normally wear, with like this giant cape and a Doom clasp on it, which looks really funny. And he rides around in this big giant floating chariot pulled by werewolves. So he's like pretty ostentatious. Yeah, he's pretty cool.
I saw hand shot up earlier, but yes, sir.
Yes, I've read the first issue of X-Men 92, but I'm not familiar with Battleworld. How does X-Men 92 fit in the continuity of the overall X-Men universe, or does it not?
It doesn't.
So it stands alone on its own.
It's its own thing, yeah. We may play around with that a little bit in the ongoing series, depending on how much they let us. I don't know if you guys keep up with the solicitations and you kind of know where the regular X-Men books are going post Secret Wars, but there's going to be some changes. And I don't know. I don't know how Secret Wars ends. I don't know anything. They just tell us enough to let us do what we want to do. But it's a very different place now than it was in the 90s, and I think it might be fun if you see those characters like get a glimpse of that future, maybe.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to play around with that a little bit. I just don't know how much I can. But good question. Yes, sir.
Do you like reference like when you write all series, or do like older technologies in your series, or you just like keep like more modern technologies, like you have?
No, like everything's like a big giant phone, and everything's like CD-ROMs, and yeah, it's the well, it's funny because it's weird because the technology of the X-Men in 1992 was like super advanced, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now it's it's real life.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of fun, and one of the fun things that we've done is in the ongoing is we'll do little things like I'm trying to remember we made little jokes because how many of you grew up like reading Larry Hama's G.I. Joe? Anybody familiar with Larry Hama's G.I. Joe? Or just G.I. Joe in general? Well, Larry Hama would always like he would make sure like if he used a military acronym or some sort of military jargon, he would always put in the he'd always put a little asterisk and he'd figure out what it is, right? So like if you put like WMD and he would put like weapon of mass destruction down there or whatever, it has a little footnote. We did that in X-Men 92 where you put like little footnotes, but they're like little footnotes that you would know. So like so what's the one? Yeah, we have EMP in there, and then we have VR, virtual reality. We have Wolverine's like, oh, this is some sort of VR program. We put a little footnote, virtual reality. So all the little things we would absolutely know what they are today. We just gotta pretend like nobody knows them. That's been fun.
Anybody else? No? All right, do you want to talk about Downset Fight a little bit?
Yeah, okay.
All right. Downset Fight is your original creation of Progressive, correct?
Yes.
All right, what happens in that?
Downset Fight is a story about fearless Chuck Fairlane. He's a football player with a little bit of an anger management issue. And he's got kind of a checkered past because of his dad, who is a notorious underground gambler. Chuck's dad sort of figures out a way to make money off of his kid after his kid decides to leave football. And that's basically his dad takes these bets and sends these football mascots after him and has him pick these fights with Chuck in public. And Chuck has to fight all these mascots. And basically it ends up being this thing called the Brawl Across America. And Chuck's on the run, and every city he goes to, like a mascot shows up and picks a fight with him. And the more mascots he beats, the better his odds get, right? So as he gets better and better at fighting these guys, eventually it leads to this big, basically this huge fight at the Super Bowl. And so yeah, that's kind of it. And I just told you the whole thing. But at the same time,
it's definitely worth reading. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's drawn by Scott Kowalczyk, who he drew a couple issues of Batman 66. He drew the Bane issue of Batman 66 that came out. It's really fun. We did it at Oni. It was our first big thing, and a lot of it takes place in South Carolina. When Chuck leaves, when he leaves professional football, he retires and becomes a football coach at Darius Rucker High School in Columbia, South Carolina. And so that's been a fun joke.
Right. There was a, you haven't talked about this, you said there was another original property you did. It was right after Downset Fight?
Oh, we did Subatomic Party Girls.
Yeah, what's that about? I don't, you didn't tell me about that.
Yeah, Subatomic Party Girls is about this girl group who are going to be the first band to play a concert on the moon.
Oh. Okay.
And something goes horribly wrong, and it shoots them across the galaxy to this world where, to this section of the galaxy where music doesn't exist. And so basically they have to introduce music to this, you know, musicless society. And they first get caught by this guy named Emperor Drixley, or Boss Drixley. And Boss Drixley is a guy who's got a mimetic memory, so basically like, he's a collector of everything, but because he's got this like infallible memory, he experiences a thing and destroys it immediately, so nobody else can have that experience. So he collects the experiences, not the actual things. And so he gets the girls, and he makes them play this great concert just for him, and then he basically tries to kill them. And that's the story. So they're on the run from this guy on the other side of the galaxy, where they're trying to shoot, where they're playing concerts here and there and all this stuff. So it's a fun book. It's a real cool book. If you're a fan of like, I don't know, like the original Flash Gordon, the Delivered has Flash Gordon, or if you're a fan of like Jim, or if you're a fan of like any of that stuff, it's got like music and you know, space stuff in it. It's kind of fun. So.
Okay. Did you release?
It's a beautiful book. No, we were leaking like playlists online because it's super fun to like come up with fake song names.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And you can find these fake playlists online, and people seem to really kind of get behind that. So.
Okay, cool.
That's available on Comixology too. They're only like 99 cents. There's only 3 of them out, so if you want to check those out, they're pretty fun.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody any questions? Anybody think of something? No.
We got time.
Yeah, one back on X-Men 92.
Yeah.
There's a particular character in the 90s series that I really like. It's kind of similar to the Punisher. So I just want to know, can you spoil me on that? Is he going to be in it? Cable?
Cable's in the miniseries.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's 90s Cable, like with the
it's
guns.
We call it original recipe Cable because he's got like, because he's still got that widow's peak, you know, and he's got kind of like that pointy Rob Liefeld hair.
And the huge shoulder pads.
And he's got the huge shoulder pads. And it's funny, like how many of you are familiar with Cable? Wow, there you go. That's the first question I should ask. Cable is probably the most 90s Marvel character of all time. And he's amazing. And he is literally like my favorite X-Men character. And so it's hilarious because when we got the book, when we talked to Marvel when they first told us that we were going to do it, like the first thing in our first pitch was, can we use Cable? Because that was like the first thing we talked about. It's like, come on, if we're going to do this, we're going to use Cable. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with X-Force, which was sort of a book that sort of launched 1,000 X-Men properties. But up at that point, it had been the X-Men, X-Factor, and the New Mutants. And then Rob Liefeld is the guy that came on X-Factor at the New Mutants at number 87. And that book, which had been the lowest selling X-Men book, immediately became like the best selling X-Men book. And that's when Marvel realized that, like, oh, okay, people like this style. They like this sort of extreme, they like this big thing, this kind of like, gruff and tough kind of guy. So I think that if Rob Liefeld had not come on the books at that time, then we would not be here today, honestly. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So whether you like Rob Liefeld's art or not, I think Rob's fantastic. I think he does good stuff. But Cable is in the miniseries. And one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to do our version of these characters so you can't confuse them with like the 616, the mainline continuity Marvel characters. So we took X-Force and we looked at it, we're like, what makes X-Force awesome? And it's like, the fact that there are all these really just like, angsty, mad characters all the time. So we took so our X-Force, originally the X-Force team, if you don't know, is Cable, Domino, Shatterstar, Feral, Warpath, and Cannonball and Boom Boom, all characters that came over from New Mutants and some new characters that Rob created, right? But we sort of had taken early on those characters off the table, so we recreated X-Force for X-Men 92. So our X-Force team consists of all the mutants who have cool superpowers, but choose not to use those superpowers and instead decide to use big swords and giant guns. Okay, so our X-Force is made up of Cable, Domino, Psylocke, Archangel, Bishop, and Deadpool. And so it's all characters use guns and swords, or have giant metal wings with blades. And so that cover, you've seen that cover?
Yeah.
That cover has been amazing. Like, people just want a new X-Force book about those guys based off that cover. It's insane. I've never seen anything like it. We got more like fan response and like emails and like tweets about that one cover than anything else. So they'll probably be back. But anyway, Cable's in it, and he's gruff, and he says "stab his eyes" a lot, and all those like body slide by 6, all those cool things that Cable said. Rob Liefeld, sorry, this is funny. Rob has a Tumblr where he posts sketches and stuff, and he's been posting a lot of sketches from that time period of characters that he was coming up with. And he's got this one sheet where he's done like 4 sketches of Cable. And there's a lot of notes on it. They're like, his arm's made of this, and his legs made of this, and he's got this thing in his eye, and he's got this. And then up in the top left-hand corner, there's a note from Rob that says, Cable. He's like Schwarzenegger. He's like Schwarzenegger in the Terminator and Predator. And it's like, man, that's exactly what he is. So he's like Terminator and Predator. So it's like, yeah, that's exactly what this guy is. Because if you don't know him, he's this giant dude, big metal arm, carries big guns, lots of spikes, shows his chest a lot, that kind of thing.
Almost like.
Yeah, a little bit. So anyway, yeah, I love Cable. I talk about, guys, seriously, this should be called like Cable, the panel, because I can talk about Cable for like the next hour and a half.
It's very exciting when the X-Force showed up. I think it's the 3rd paper issue, I think.
Yeah, they show up in they show up in number 3.
And it was just like, oh well, I didn't realize it would get better. And it was just the interaction. It's like someone like super serious, like Cable, and then having Deadpool next to him. And, doing what Deadpool does. Yeah, it's really good.
Speaking of Deadpool, which one of you writes for? Which one of you usually does this dialogue?
We split it. I mean, do you have a specific line you're talking about?
No, I just.
The line in number 4 where he's about.
Deadpool, sorry.
No, the line. Well, Deadpool's very different in the '90s too, if you remember. Like Deadpool, when he first came out, like Deadpool didn't quite have the same like humor that he has now. Deadpool was he was a little bit darker. He would still make like kind of black humor kind of jokes, but he was not necessarily the same kind of guy he is now. So we kind of lean into that a little bit, where he's kind of more snarky than he is like a joke kind of guy.
I will read your Deadpool.
There's a really funny scene. Deadpool breaks the 4th wall. I don't know if you guys know, but Deadpool will talk to the audience and do stuff like that. There's a scene in number 4 where he's about to get crushed by a cymbal foot, and he looks at his audience. He's like, "Well, this thing just being a collector's item." Yeah. Deadpool. So yeah, there's a lot of funny jokes like that.
Okay, well, where were we at? Can I touch your phone?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We got a
little
10
time.
minutes maybe?
Yeah, that's so let's end with, I mean, you've lived here your whole life, right? And you just started writing comics. And do you have any advice for anybody that wants to get into business? I mean, you went from your own downset fight book to now you're writing X-Men for Marvel. Right?
As the ladies in Hercules would say, you went from 0 to hero.
So, do you have any advice for anybody that's into that or wants to do it or what to think about?
I mean, anybody who wants to do it probably has heard the same kind of advice. Write, read, and then write about twice as much as you read. The only piece of advice that has worked for me is don't work in a vacuum, I guess. Like, it's hard to write by yourself, because if you try to just sit down and write, it's like, it gets to be pretty tedious and boring, and it's very, it's very solitary, right? Like, it's easy to kind of not get, like, just disappointed in your own writing. I mean, like just kind of figure out what works for you, and then find a group that kind of works too. Because I think when you have like that accountability of someone that you're working with, or someone that you're kind of like talking to about your work, it helps you grow as a writer. So I think that's one of the things. Columbia's got a very big comics community. Especially when I was in college, there was a good group. I don't know if you guys know Eric Woodard. He runs Scratch and Spin, the comic store in West Columbia. And Eric used to do a book called A Stranger's Tale, and it was the first time that I'd seen anybody self-publish a book when I came to school at like 18 or 19 years old. And I was just amazing, because at the time I was like, oh man, I didn't know anybody could do that. I didn't know you can make your own comics. I mean, I made my own comics, but I know you could like make them when they look good, you know what I mean? And so, Eric sort of opened some doors, and I used to have lunch meetings with Eric and 3 or 4 other guys. And I think that if I had not talked to those guys about comics all the time, or at least knew that those guys were asking me what I was working on, and me asking them what they were working on, just kind of feeding off each other, I feel like that I wouldn't be here. So I feel like if you're one, especially if you're wanting to be a comics writer, it helps to talk to other people about writing and not just necessarily try to work on your own, like by yourself. Work on your own stuff, but just don't necessarily do it alone. Friends don't let friends write comics alone.
Alright, do you have any more questions or anything? No? Is there anything else?
We're good. No, that's good. Guys, this was great. This was a much bigger turnout than I expected. Thank you very much. This is awesome. If you guys want to pick up the books, I've got some left. I'm at table A23, but most of the local shops around town have some copies left too. We got good news this week. Number 1 and number 3, which is the X-Force cover, no, they're all sold out at Diamond, so they may be going back to second printings on those. I'm not sure.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, the book's doing real well. And if you have any questions for me, like I said, I'll be at the table. Thank you guys a lot. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys.